You don't belong here anymore, Frank said. His arms were crossed. His voice didn't shake, just cold, flat, final. Behind him, Linda smirked, like she'd finally won something. Tyler and Madison stood in the hallway, already eyeing my room like it was up for grabs. No one asked if I had a plan. No one offered a moment. It wasn't a conversation. It was a removal. I didn't argue, didn't cry, didn't ask why. I just looked at them each one and walked out. Not because I was weak, but because I knew something they didn't. The house they claimed I helped pay for it. I signed the papers, my name's on the deed. They forgot. They thought silence meant surrender. But I had been watching, waiting, so I left with nothing in my hands, but everything in my favor. They thought they kicked me out, what they didn't know. They were standing in my house, and one day soon they'd remember that the hard way. I didn't cry that night, but my chest ached in a way I can't explain. Not from sadness, from remembering what this house used to be. A quiet morning, the smell of Mom's coffee, light coming through the kitchen window, Frank humming while reading the paper. That was before the noise, before Linda, before everything changed too fast, too soon. Mom had only been gone a year when he brought her in, smiling, loud, with 2 kids in tow and a suitcase full of perfume and plans. I tried. God, I tried. I told myself grief made people reckless, that Frank didn't know how to be alone, that maybe we all needed a second chance. I let her take Mom's chair at the table. I smiled when she rearranged the living room. I ignored the perfume on the bed sheets. I swallowed the lump in my throat and called it adjusting. I wanted it to work, because losing one parent felt enough. But slowly, so slowly, I realized this wasn't my home anymore. I was just a guest with fading rights. It started with little things. Books I loved boxed and pushed into the garage. My coffee mug, the one Mom gave me, gone, replaced with matching sets Linda picked out. My name on the Wi-Fi removed. The front door key moved. No one said anything, but everything spoke. At dinner, I wasn't asked if I was coming. Sometimes I'd walk in and they'd already eaten. Other times the table was full, but no chair for me. I kept pretending, kept telling myself it was a phase, that maybe I was imagining it. But then came the day I found my closet emptied. Linda smiled. Just organizing. You had too much stuff. Tyler snickered behind her. Madison rolled her eyes like I didn't matter. Frank said nothing. He stood behind them, arms crossed again, like that had become his only language. I went back to my room, or what was left of it, and sat on the bare mattress. That was the night I knew. Not guessed, not wondered. I was no longer part of their family. And the space I once called mine was already being measured for someone else. I should have yelled, thrown something, demanded answers, but I didn't. I stayed quiet, too quiet. Not because I was afraid, because I was learning, watching. Each silence was a note, every cold glance a record, and the song they played, it told me where I stood. Linda changed the locks the next week. No warning, just a text from Frank. Don't worry, we're making things more secure. I stood on the porch that night, key in hand, useless. Lights on inside, laughter at the dinner table. They didn't see me, or maybe they did, but no one opened the door. I slept in my car, windows up, phone off, eyes wide open. The next day, Frank gave me a check, folded small, like hush money, like I was an inconvenience, not a daughter. Use it to figure things out, he said, his voice flat, like I was a problem he'd finally solved. I took it. Not out of need, but as evidence. Because something had changed, not just them, me. And soon they'd realize what a mistake they'd made when they chose to forget who actually owned that house. They forgot the papers I signed. The day we closed on the house, Frank's credit had fallen through, but mine hadn't. I was 22, fresh out of college, still holding on to hope, still believing in family. Half the down payment came from my savings. Every cent I'd earned working nights and weekends, the rest was split. But the deed, it bore 2 names, mine and his, joint tenants, equal rights. Back then, I didn't care. I thought we were a team, a father and daughter building something new after so much loss. So when I signed my name, I did it with pride, not to protect myself, but to invest in us. I never imagined I'd need that paper. But people change. Or maybe they just reveal themselves when they think you're not useful anymore. Frank forgot. Linda never knew. And the kids, they just assumed. But I remembered everything. Where the original was kept, what it meant, how legally no one could push me out without dealing with me first. And quietly I started planning. Not for revenge, for justice. I didn't confront them. Didn't storm in with documents or threats. That's not how you win something that matters. I waited, watched, let them believe the silence meant defeat. Weeks passed. They got bolder. Linda started renovations, new tiles in the kitchen, a chandelier in the hallway. Frank funded it with his retirement. Linda called it finally making the house ours, and I let her. They repainted my old room, used it to store holiday boxes and Tyler's guitar. He posted about it my new creative space. I saved the screenshot. They bought a new couch. Custom. Beige leather. Expensive. Receipts I knew they'd regret. Every dollar they spent tightened the knot they didn't know was around them. Because legally every upgrade they made had my name beneath it. And I never said a word, not because I was scared, but because I understood sometimes the best revenge is patience. Let them build their illusion. Let them settle in. Let them feel safe. Because when it was time, I wouldn't ask for anything. I would take what was already mine. 3 weeks after they locked me out, I filed the title request, paid the fee, waited exactly 2 days. When the report came, I held it in my hands like proof of memory. There it was, my name bold and binding, 50% ownership, joint tenants with rights of survivorship. No one could erase that. Not Frank, not Linda, not all their pretending. I didn't send it to them. Not yet. I wanted it quiet, clean, unshakable. I booked a consultation with Mr. Phillips, a calm man with square glasses and a sharper mind than anyone expected. You've got every right, he said. Partition action is straightforward. We file. They either buy you out or the court forces a sale. He asked why I waited. I smiled. Because they needed time to show me who they really were. He nodded slowly. Then let's remind them who you are. And in that moment, it stopped being about hurt. Stopped being about being cast aside. It became something else. Power. But not loud. Not cruel. Just the quiet return of what was always mine. The letter was short, 1 page, certified with a return receipt. I mailed it on a Monday morning, then sat at a quiet cafe and watched the rain trace lines down the window. It wasn't revenge. It was notice that the house wasn't just theirs, that I wasn't just a memory they could erase. 2 days later, the receipt came back. Signed, received. Silence followed. For 4 days. No calls, no texts, just the kind of quiet that tells you they're scrambling. Frank called on day 5. No greeting, no apology. You're being dramatic, he said. I held the phone steady. My name's on the deed, I said. I'm being legal. Pause. Then the line went dead. Linda emailed next. Subject. We can talk. She asked to meet. Said families don't need lawyers. That we could work this out like adults. I didn't respond. Because adults don't evict people they raise. They don't erase history, then ask for kindness. I didn't need to reply. The next move wasn't a conversation. It was a court date. And I was ready. The calls came late at night. Blocked numbers, voicemails full of guilt thinly wrapped in concern. You'll ruin this family. There's nowhere else for us to go. Your mother would be ashamed. That one made me pause. Just a second, just enough to feel it burn. Because Mom taught me to be kind but never small. She taught me to bend but never break for people who wouldn't do the same. They used her name like a shield, but she would have seen through them. She always did. Linda sent pictures of the house Christmas lights, the tree, Tyler sitting by the fire. No caption, just the image like I'd miss what they stole. Frank followed up with a message. This isn't you. He was wrong. This was exactly me. The version they forgot. The version that doesn't flinch when pushed to the edge. I didn't answer. I just saved everything, every word, every picture. Because they weren't trying to fix anything. They were trying to survive the consequences. And for the first time, they realized I wasn't going to fold. I sat on the floor of my apartment. No furniture, just silence and the envelope with the court date inside. The city hummed outside my window, but I heard something else, my mother's voice. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady, like always. When people push you out, don't beg for space. Build your own. She told me that when I was 13, after a friend stopped talking to me without reason. Back then, I cried for hours. Now I understood what she meant, what she was preparing me for. Not everyone who smiles loves you. Not everyone who raises you protects you. And not every house is a home just because your name is on the mailbox. She taught me to fight in silence, to know the law, to know my rights. And when the time came to move with calm hands, not shaking ones. So I circled the date on the calendar. One red mark. Not for revenge, not for pride, but for truth. Because this wasn't just about property. It was about being seen. And I was done disappearing so other people could feel comfortable. The courthouse was colder than I expected, not the air, the looks. Frank didn't even glance at me. Linda clutched her purse like I might take that too. Tyler and Madison didn't come. Their lawyer was late. Mine wasn't. Mr. Phillips greeted me with a quiet nod, a calm presence in a room full of tension. He reviewed the papers again, though we both knew they were solid. When their lawyer finally arrived, he looked surprised. Not at the case, at me. I think they expected someone emotional, someone unsure, someone they could talk over. Instead, I wore black, hair pulled back, eyes clear, voice steady. The judge called our names. We stood. Linda's lawyer asked for a delay, cited emotional strain. Phillips replied without blinking. Her name's on the deed. 50%. This is well within her right. The judge nodded. Approve the partition sale? 60 days to buy me out or vacate? I didn't smile, didn't gloat. I just looked straight ahead while Linda's hand tightened on Frank's sleeve. They thought the courtroom would save them, but the truth had already done its job. 60 days. That's what the judge gave them. 2 months to buy me out or leave. Frank asked for more time outside the courtroom. Voice low, almost gentle. I just need a little more room to figure things out. I looked at him, not with anger, not with softness, just distance. You had plenty of room, I said. Back when you still saw me as family. He didn't reply, just walked away, shaking his head like I was the one who failed. Back at home, I opened a calendar and circled their deadline. Red ink, one sharp stroke. They didn't speak to me again, not directly. But Linda tried once more, through a mutual friend. Maybe she'd accept some kind of settlement. She doesn't really need the money. It wasn't about money. It was about remembering what they made me forget, that I belonged. They filled the days with packing. I filled mine with breathing, walking, choosing where I'd live next. Because when someone takes your space, the best answer is to claim something better, not out of spite, but because healing deserves walls that don't echo betrayal. I didn't tell them I was coming, didn't call, didn't warn. I showed up on day 60. Morning sun, quiet street, my key still worked. The house smelled like lavender cleaner and something else, something desperate. Boxes stacked near the door, curtains gone, walls bare. Linda looked up from a half-packed box. Her hands froze. You're really doing this? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Tyler brushed past me in the hallway, muttering, "Psycho." I let it hang in the air, let it sting him, not me. I walked through each room slow, steady. The kitchen they remodeled. The couch I never sat on, the room that used to be mine now hollow and echoing. No one tried to stop me, no one dared. Frank finally came down the stairs. His face was tired, older somehow. He didn't speak right away. Then, "You really hate me that much?" I looked at him, and for the first time I told the truth. "No, I just love myself more than I fear you." He said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. The sale went fast, faster than anyone expected. Clean title, good location, strong market. A young couple bought it, newlyweds, hopeful eyes, soft voices. They didn't ask questions, just smiled, signed, and handed over a check. My share was wired directly, 50%, untouched, undisputed. I stared at the number in my account. Not for what it could buy, but for what it meant. I wasn't erased. I wasn't invisible. I was heard in signatures and legal lines. Frank didn't say goodbye. Neither did Linda. They left the key under a flower pot. No note, no message. It was better that way. The movers came at 9. The new owners arrived at 10. By noon, the house wasn't mine anymore. Not legally, not emotionally. I stood across the street for a moment, watched sunlight hit the windows, watched strangers carry in boxes of beginnings, and I felt nothing. No ache, no loss, just space. Quiet, clean space, because some homes are meant to hold you, and some just hold the lesson you had to learn before you built your own. I bought a small condo on the other side of the city, 1 bedroom, 1 window that caught the sunrise just right. No fancy remodels, no shared walls with resentment, just clean walls, quiet floors, and a front door that only I had the key to. I moved in with 3 boxes. Books, clothes, and a single photo of Mom. She's laughing in it, real eyes closed, head tilted laughter. I placed it on the kitchen shelf. No speeches, no promises, just breath. For the first few days, I didn't go anywhere. Didn't answer messages. Didn't check in on Frank. Didn't need to. I made coffee in the mug Linda had thrown out. I'd found it tucked away in the attic, cracked but still mine, and every morning I held it with both hands, not out of nostalgia, but because it grounded me. This place didn't just shelter me. It reflected me. No longer someone begging for space, no longer waiting to be chosen. I chose myself, and every corner of this home reminded me of that. Some weeks later, I drove past the old house, not on purpose, just a quiet Sunday and a familiar street. The porch was empty. No flowers, no lights in the windows, just stillness. It looked smaller somehow, not in size, in spirit, like something had been pulled out and never put back. The curtains were new, different color, but the bones were the same. The place still held memories, but not mine anymore. I didn't stop, just slowed at the corner. Let the silence catch me. I thought I'd feel anger or grief, but I didn't. All I felt was distance, the kind that isn't bitter, just final. That house had been hollow long before I forced them out. They emptied it with every silent dinner, every door locked behind me, every choice that said I wasn't worth staying for. Now it was just bricks. And somewhere else in a smaller space with softer air was home. Not perfect, but mine. And when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the girl they tried to erase. I saw someone they could never push out again. I thought the guilt might come later, in waves, in shadows before sleep, but it didn't. Not once. I didn't regret the letter, or the court date, or the silence that followed. Because what I reclaimed wasn't just space, it was voice. And that voice had been quiet for too long. People said I was cold, said I should have tried harder. Family's complicated, they reminded me. But cruelty isn't complicated, neglect isn't love, and exile isn't a misunderstanding. Frank chose comfort, Linda chose control, I chose myself. And in the end, that choice echoed louder than all their years of dismissal. Sometimes I wondered if they ever drove by my new place, if they ever thought about calling. But the thought passed as quickly as it came, because I didn't need the closure from the ones who never opened a door. My peace wasn't built on apology, it was built on truth. And the truth was simple. You don't owe loyalty to the people who weaponized your love just to make room for their convenience. The hardest part wasn't walking away from the house. It was walking away from the version of me that stayed too long. The girl who kept the peace, who smiled through silence, who believed that being quiet was the same as being strong. I carried her for years, held her in every room where I wasn't wanted, protected her with excuses and hope. But healing means putting her down, gently, gratefully, because I didn't need to be softer. I needed to be seen. And I wasn't not by Frank, not by Linda, not even by the girl I once was. Now I wake up and feel something I didn't recognize at first, lightness. Not joy, not yet, but a quiet kind of freedom. No eggshells underfoot, no waiting for the next cold shoulder, just space, real space. I started writing again, short pieces, Nothing I shared, just lines that felt like mine. And in each word I felt her return, the version of me they tried to erase. She didn't come back angry, she came back whole. And that was enough. They never saw the cracks, the quiet unraveling, the way I folded myself smaller just to fit their version of daughter. They noticed when I left, but not when I disappeared. Not when I stopped speaking at dinner. Not when my birthday passed without a card or a question. Not when my opinions became interruptions. Frank looked surprised in court, like he didn't know how things had gotten that far, but it wasn't sudden. It was slow, 1,000 tiny cuts he chose not to see. And Linda, she never had to hate me. She just had to ignore me long enough for it to sting the same. They didn't break me overnight. They wore me down with absence dressed as normal. That's what made it easy for them, to call me dramatic, to call me cold, because they never truly looked. Not once, not really. But now I look in the mirror and I see everything they missed. Not bitterness, not revenge, just clarity. Sharp as glass, soft as truth, and finally, I'm visible. It wasn't one moment that changed everything. It was the build-up, the slow erosion of belonging. But if I had to name the turning point, it was the night they laughed in the kitchen while I stood outside, key useless in my hand. That sound, their joy without me, was louder than any insult. It told me the truth. I wasn't forgotten. I was excluded. Intentionally. Repeatedly. And once you know that you can't unknow it, you can't keep making room where none exists. That night, I sat in my car until sunrise, engine off, hands frozen, heart awake. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I planned. That's the moment I stopped surviving them and started protecting myself. Not with anger, but with certainty. It was no longer about proving anything. Not to Frank, not to Linda, not to anyone who saw me as replaceable. It became about reclaiming space in rooms and conversations in my own story. And once I made that decision, everything that followed wasn't vengeance. It was justice, written slowly, signed in ink, and sealed with silence. The second court date came faster than I expected. Same building, same hallway, but everything felt different. This time, I didn't hesitate, didn't scan the room for their faces. I already knew what I'd see. Frank sat stiff, his eyes on the floor. Linda had that same tight-lipped smile, the kind that cracks when no one's watching. Their lawyer shuffled papers, tried again to delay. Emotional toll, he said. Too much disruption. But the judge was firm. This isn't about emotion. It's about ownership. Mr. Phillips handed over every document, neat, precise. Deed, title report, timeline of events. I didn't speak. Didn't need to. The facts stood taller than any apology ever could. When the judge ruled final and clear, they had 30 days to comply or the house would be sold at auction. Frank didn't argue. He didn't look up. Linda blinked fast like she might cry, but didn't want to waste the tears in public. I watched them fall quiet, the same silence they used against me now, circling them like a closing door. It wasn't revenge. It was gravity finally falling where it belonged. They asked for more time. Through their lawyer in carefully chosen words, 60 days is difficult under these circumstances. Surely she can offer grace. Grace. That word again. Always asked from me, never given to me. The judge looked at me. Would you be willing to extend the timeline? I paused, not out of doubt, out of memory. I remembered birthdays missed, locked doors, quiet dinners where my voice didn't matter, and a key that no longer turned. No, Your Honor, I said. My offer is what the court already granted. A simple sentence, but it carried every moment they made me feel invisible. The ruling stood. 60 days. No more. Outside, Frank didn't say a word. Linda tried to meet my eyes, but I looked past her. I wasn't angry. I was done. That's the difference. They thought I wanted more time, more money, more pain. But all I ever wanted was to be treated like I mattered. And now the only thing I wanted was distance. So I gave them the minimum. Not out of cruelty, out of peace. The kind that finally belonged to me. I heard through a neighbor they'd started packing early. Linda was sorting through dishes, deciding what was worth taking. Frank stayed mostly upstairs, quiet. The garage filled with boxes. the kind labeled with black marker kitchen bathroom Tyler stuff. Funny how quickly a home becomes inventory when you know you're leaving. I didn't check on them, didn't drive by, didn't send reminders, but I imagined the silence inside, the awkward steps around each other, the moments when the reality caught up to their pride. Linda had put so much into the remodeled stainless steel appliances of farmhouse sink paint she picked herself. Paid for it all, never realizing she was upgrading half my house. Frank must have thought it would stay his just because I stopped coming around. But ownership doesn't vanish when love gets quiet. And now every item boxed, every drawer emptied was one more thread pulling them from the illusion they built without me. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. But I did breathe easier, because slowly, without shouting, the house was remembering who it truly belonged to. On the 61st morning, the house was mine again. Officially, clean title, no contest. I didn't rush over, I took my time, made coffee, watched the steam curl above the rim. When I arrived, the street was quiet, the driveway empty, a for sale sign staked in the lawn, leaning slightly in the wind. I walked up the front steps, same creak beneath the third plank, same brass handle now dulled with fingerprints. The door was unlocked. Inside, empty, echoes of footsteps long gone, dust on the windowsills and one cabinet left open in the kitchen. I stood in the middle of the living room and listened. Not for voices, but for what remained. No scent of perfume, no tension in the walls, just space, still silent mine. I walked through each room slowly, as if reclaiming them by presence alone. There were no ghosts, no grief, only the weight lifting. Not because they were gone, but because I had stayed standing through all of it. The loss, the betrayal, the erasure. And still, I was here. Whole, unmoved. I sat on the floor of what used to be my bedroom. No furniture, no sound, just faint outlines on the walls where posters once hung. The window was still crooked, letting in light at a slant. I remembered lying here as a teenager watching clouds drift through that same frame. Back then, the silence felt safe. Now it felt clean. They took everything they thought mattered, the couch, the dishes, even the wind chimes Mom once hung on the porch. But they couldn't take what they never understood. The memories. The history woven into the baseboards. The strength that grew in the corners they ignored. I traced my hand along the floor. Wood worn, still warm from the sun. It didn't feel like home anymore. Not really. But it didn't hurt either. That was the difference. Time didn't heal this place. Truth did. And in its emptiness, I saw something new a closing. Not dramatic, not loud, just final, like a breath let go after being held far too long. I stood up, dusted off my palms, and walked out the front door without looking back. The money came the next morning. Direct deposit. No call, no message. Just a number on a screen, cold and quiet but real. 50%, exactly what I was owed. No more, no less. I stared at it for a while, not because I needed it, but because it confirmed something deeper. That they couldn't erase me. That no matter how tightly they shut the door, my name stayed written in ink they couldn't smudge. I didn't touch the money right away. Didn't make plans. Didn't shop or celebrate. I just let it sit there, proof that walking away didn't mean losing. The world didn't end when I stopped explaining myself. It got quieter, wider. Later that evening, I made one transfer, a down payment on something small, modest, and mine. No shared walls, no ghosts in the hall. Just clean floors, a front door key that belonged only to me, and a space where I could breathe without apology. Sometimes power doesn't roar. Sometimes it just arrives in a line of numbers, unread emails, and the steady calm of knowing you were right all along. The condo was quiet. Too quiet at first. No footsteps overhead, no distant voices behind thin walls, just me and the sound of my own breathing. I unpacked slowly. One box a day. Books first, then the blanket Mom crocheted before she got sick. Soft faded, still holding the scent of lavender and old summers. The windows faced east. Morning light poured in, gently spilling across the hardwood like a quiet promise. There were no pictures on the walls yet, no furniture that matched. But I wasn't rushing because this time I wasn't filling a space to prove I belonged. I was letting it unfold on my own terms. The fridge held simple things: fruit tea, leftovers from a quiet dinner alone, nothing forced, nothing dressed up. Sometimes I'd catch myself listening for a door slam, for footsteps in a hallway that wasn't mine. But it never came, and slowly my shoulders dropped, not in surrender, in relief. The silence wasn't empty, it was full of everything I'd been missing, and in that stillness I finally heard myself without interruption. In that space, there was no one left to impress, no one to adjust for, no expectations waiting behind a closed door. I didn't have to explain why I liked silence, why I read in the mornings, why I didn't answer texts right away. There was no Linda watching me from the corner of her eye, no Frank measuring my tone like a threat, just me. Untethered. At first, it felt strange to exist without defense, to not feel the need to justify every choice, every boundary, but then it became peaceful, and then it became power. I stopped rehearsing conversations that would never happen, stopped writing answers to questions they never cared enough to ask. There's a kind of freedom that comes from letting go of being understood, from realizing that your worth was never meant to be proven to people who refuse to see it. I wasn't angry anymore. Not even distant. I was simply done. And in that quiet finality, I discovered something I'd never had in that house, not even once. Ease. Pure, uncomplicated ease. Sometimes I drafted texts I never sent. Short ones. Hope you're well. Just wanted to say hi. I'd stare at the blinking cursor thumb hovering, then lock the phone. Not out of spite, out of clarity. What was there to say? That I'd survived them? That I no longer checked the mailbox hoping for their names? The truth is, they made the silence. They built it brick by brick with every cold glance, every skipped birthday, every word left unsaid until I learned to do the same. I kept those unsent messages as reminders. Not of who they were, but of who I no longer needed to be. There were days I wondered if Frank ever regretted it. If Linda thought about how easily she erased me, if Tyler remembered my name when he opened a door in someone else's house, but I never reached out. Because closure doesn't always come with conversation. Sometimes it arrives quietly in the decision not to reopen what broke you. Sometimes healing looks like letting the message sit unsent as proof that silence can be sacred too. People asked if I ever heard from them again. Frank, Linda, the kids. I didn't. Not a call, not a card, not even a forwarded piece of mail. It's strange how fast people disappear when you stop bending. They vanish like smoke once they realize you won't fold the way you used to. At first, that silence felt heavy, like something was missing. But then I realized nothing was missing. I'd just been trained to call absence a wound, and really it was a gift. No more second-guessing my tone, no more shrinking myself to be allowed at the table, no more apologies for taking up space in a home I helped build. Their silence confirmed it all, not my cruelty, but their discomfort with my boundaries. They weren't waiting for reconciliation. They were hoping I'd break, but I didn't. I bloomed. Not loudly, not out of revenge, just slowly in a room of my own where no one had the power to make me small again. And in their absence, I found something: they never offered me peace without conditions. There's one question Frank never asked me. Not when he handed me that folded check, not at the courthouse, not even on moving day. He never asked, "Are you okay?" He never looked past the surface, never paused to wonder what it felt like to be pushed out of your own home by the people who claim to love you. Instead, he spoke in transactions, instructions, deadlines, and I let him, because asking would have required him to see me as more than an obstacle. Maybe he thought I was fine. Maybe pretending I was strong made it easier for him to walk away. But I wasn't fine. Not then. I was breaking quietly, holding myself together in the silence he left behind. But that question, it never came. And now, even if it did, it wouldn't matter, because I no longer need him to ask. I know the answer. I am okay. Not because he cared, not because they came back, but because I did. To myself, fully, finally. And no one can take that away from me ever again. I took one last drive by the house, not to revisit pain, just to witness the ending. It looked different. New shutters, fresh paint, But beneath it all, I still saw the cracks. The porch where I once waited with a broken key. The window where Linda used to watch to make sure I'd left. None of it hurt anymore. It just existed, like a chapter in a book I'd already finished. A couple stood outside holding hands, pointing at the yard. Maybe it was theirs now. Maybe they'd fill the space with better stories. I didn't stop, didn't slow down, didn't need to, because I had no pieces left in that place. No roots, no longing, no more what ifs. It wasn't home, hadn't been for a long time, and that truth, once bitter, was now clean. I turned the corner without looking back. No ache, no regret, just forward motion, steady quiet, and mine. The house taught me many things, but the most important, you don't have to stay where you were never seen. And walking away can sometimes be the most honest way to come home. The first morning in my condo, I stood barefoot in the kitchen as sunlight poured through the window, quiet, golden, unbothered. No voices, no tension in the air, no second guessing the way I moved or the way I existed. Just me, breathing, present. I made coffee, used the old mug Linda tried to toss, still chipped, still mine. I sat at the window as the city stirred awake below. And for once, I didn't feel behind or late or lesser. I wasn't holding my breath. I wasn't hoping to be heard. I was simply at peace. This place wasn't big, but it didn't need to be, because every corner, every silence belonged to me. Not shared, not borrowed, not tolerated, claimed. I glanced at the photo of Mom on the shelf, her smile still warm, still knowing. I whispered, I did it. Not out loud, just enough for the truth to settle in the walls around me. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't victory. It was freedom, earned quiet and deeply mine. Sometimes I wonder what Mom would have said if she'd seen it all play out. Not the courtroom, not the letters, just the quiet unraveling of the people we once called family. I think she would have sat beside me on that first night they shut the door, not to tell me what to do, but just to stay. To listen. She wouldn't have tried to fix it. She never believed in pretending. Let them show you who they are, she used to say. And when they do believe them, I hear her in the quiet moments when I water the plant near the window, when I fold my blanket at night, when I sit in the stillness and feel no need to fill it. She wouldn't have cheered the outcome. She didn't need things to be fair to know when they were right. And I think she'd be proud. Not of the fight, but of the way I stayed honest when it would have been easier to disappear. Her photo stays on the shelf, not for memory, for presence. Because somehow, through it all, she never really left. Frank and Linda never saw the whole me. Only pieces. Only the version that stayed quiet so things wouldn't break. They saw the polite nods, the quiet exits, the silence that came when I was pushed aside. But they never saw the girl who read legal contracts at midnight, who saved receipts, screenshots, emails, not to use as weapons, but as proof she wasn't making it up. They never saw the woman who swallowed hurt and turned it into clarity. They mistook quiet for weakness, stillness for surrender. But still, waters don't mean emptiness, they mean depth. And by the time they realized I wasn't folding, I had already stood up. They thought they'd taught me boundaries by locking the door. But Mom had done that years before, only softer, wiser. You don't have to prove anything, she once whispered, especially not to the people who keep asking you to shrink. I didn't shrink. Not this time. Not anymore. And maybe they never saw the whole me, but that's okay. Because I did. Finally. Fully. And that was more than enough. Word got around eventually. Friends from college, old neighbors, people who remembered Sunday barbecues and family photos in the yard. They reached out, some with surprise, some with careful curiosity. I had no idea it got that bad. Why didn't you say anything? You always looked so together. That's the thing about being hurt quietly. No one sees the unraveling when you've trained yourself to smile through it. I didn't blame them. They only knew what I allowed, and I allowed very little. Because explaining pain to people who haven't lived it often feels like reliving it twice. One friend asked, "What finally made you walk away?" I paused before answering. It wasn't one moment. It was the last time I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't recognize the person making everyone else comfortable. That landed heavy. She nodded slowly, like she understood something without needing more. It wasn't about revenge, it was about return to myself, to truth. And I told her, not proudly but clearly, I didn't burn the bridge. I just stopped building it from only one side. Some people assumed I wanted to hurt them. That forcing the sale, taking back the house, was my way of getting even. But that was never it. I didn't want to see them fall. I just needed to stop falling for the idea that love should feel like disappearing. Justice doesn't always come with slamming doors and raised voices. Sometimes it's quiet, measured, legal. Sometimes it looks like paperwork, court dates, and standing alone while the people who left you pretend they didn't. I didn't smile when the ruling came through, didn't cheer when the wire hit my account, because I wasn't celebrating their loss. I was honoring my own survival. People confuse standing up for yourself with spite. But truthfully, I was never angry enough to destroy them. Just tired enough to finally choose myself. And in choosing myself, I lost the need to make them understand. That's the freedom no one talks about. Not proving a point, not making them sorry, just walking away with your head high, your heart clear, and your silence loud enough to never be mistaken for weakness again. There was a time I imagined one last conversation. Frank would sit across from me, no defenses, no distractions. Just a father, finally ready to ask what happened between us, and I'd tell him. Not with bitterness, but with the kind of truth that only grows in silence. I'd tell him how it felt to be invisible at his table, to be replaced then erased, to knock on the door of a house I helped buy and be met with silence, but that conversation never came, and eventually I stopped needing it. Some wounds don't close with words, they close with distance, with boundaries respected, not begged for. He may never know how deep it went, how hard it was to keep choosing peace when anger would have been easier. But I know I didn't walk away out of hate. I walked away because staying meant losing myself piece by piece, and the moment I chose me, the need for that conversation faded. Some stories don't end with closure, they end with clarity, and sometimes that's even stronger. If you're listening and you've ever been pushed aside in your own story, this part is for you. You don't have to raise your voice to be heard. You don't have to fight dirty to stand your ground. And you don't need their permission to take up space. Kindness is not weakness. Silence is not surrender. And walking away doesn't make you cold, it makes you free. I spent years trying to be the easiest to love, the least complicated, the one who didn't ask for too much. And it almost cost me everything, not just a house, but myself. So, if you've ever been made small, ever been told to stay quiet, ever been left outside while they made room for everyone else, know this: you are allowed to leave the table that never made space for you. You are allowed to protect your peace, even if it means starting over, especially if it means starting over. And the day you choose yourself fully, unapologetically, will be the day your life begins again. That was mine. Let it be yours too. People think the story ends when you win. When the papers are signed, when the house is sold, when silence replaces the shouting. But that's not the end. That's the beginning. Because the real story doesn't live in what you lost. It lives in who you became after everything fell away. I no longer walk into rooms hoping to be chosen. I no longer explain my boundaries like apologies. I no longer shrink to fit places that were never meant to hold me. Now I choose where I live, who I let in, what love looks like. Not out of fear, but out of knowing. Knowing that my worth was never tied to their comfort, that my silence held strength they couldn't understand, and that walking away wasn't about closing a door, it was about opening my own. If you've ever been cast out, pushed aside, forgotten, hear this: you are not broken. You are becoming, and for me, everything truly began not the day they left, but the day I stayed standing on my own, quiet, whole, and finally home. If this story spoke to something inside you, something you've lived, or something you're still healing from, I'd love to hear it. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice might be exactly what someone else needs today. And if you're finding strength in stories like this, hit subscribe, because this journey isn't over. There's more ahead, more truth, more healing, and maybe more of you in every word we share next.